Bathsheba's story. What really happened between David and Bathsheba? There are few stories in ancient literature more discussed, more misunderstood, and more morally complex than the account of David and Bathsheba. For over 2,800 years, this narrative has been retold in synagogues, churches, art galleries, and countless sermons. It involves a warrior king at the height of his power, a beautiful woman bathing on a rooftop, an act of adultery, a cover-up, a murder, and consequences that would tear a dynasty apart. The episode has generated passionate debate. Was Bathsheba a seductress who tempted the king? Was she a victim of royal abuse of power? Did she have agency in what happened? Or was she trapped by the social structures of ancient Israel? Over the centuries, interpretations have ranged wildly. Some medieval commentators blamed Bathsheba for bathing where she could be seen. Some modern readers see her as a passive victim. Others point to her later influence in Solomon's rise and wonder if she was more calculating than the text reveals. Rumors, moralizing, and projection have clouded the historical account. In this video, you're going to encounter the actual story as preserved in the primary source, the Hebrew Bible. Specifically, 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. With context from 1 Kings chapters 1 and 2, we'll examine what the text explicitly says, what it implies, what ancient Near Eastern law and custom reveal about power and marriage, and what we can and cannot know. We'll explore the political and military backdrop of David's kingdom around 990 BCE, the architecture and social norms of royal Jerusalem, and the catastrophic chain of events that followed one evening when the king stayed home from war. You'll see how this story fits into the larger narrative of David's reign, how it foreshadows the violent unraveling of his family, and why ancient editors preserved this unflattering account of Israel's greatest king. By the end, you'll understand not only what happened between David and Bathsheba, but also why this story has endured as one of the most penetrating examinations of power, desire, and accountability in world literature. The kingdom at its height. To understand the story, we must first understand the world it happened in. By approximately 990 BCE, David had been king of a united Israel for roughly 15 years. He had transformed a loose confederation of tribes into a centralized monarchy. His capital, Jerusalem, a city he had conquered from the Jebusites around 1005 BCE, sat on a strategic ridge in the hill country. The city covered perhaps 12 to 15 acres at this time. Archaeological evidence suggests a population of 1,200 to 1,500 people within the walls, with perhaps 3,000 more in surrounding settlements. The royal quarter occupied the highest point, likely including a palace complex, administrative buildings, and housing for officials and their families. David's military successes had been extraordinary. He had defeated the Philistines, who had dominated the coastal plain and threatened Israelite territory for generations. He had subdued Moab to the east, Edom to the south, and Ammon to the northeast. He had established tributary relationships with Aramean kingdoms to the north. His kingdom now stretched from the northern Negev to the southern reaches of modern Syria, and from the Mediterranean coastal approaches to the desert frontier east of the Jordan River. This was an empire by the standards of the region. Encompassing perhaps 40,000 square miles, tribute flowed into Jerusalem. Grain, livestock, precious metals, cedar wood from Lebanon. The archaeological record from this period, though debated in its details, shows evidence of increased construction, fortification, and administrative organization across the highland regions. David's army was the instrument of this expansion. The core fighting force probably numbered between 3,000 and 5,000 professional soldiers, divided into units commanded by loyal officers. There were the 30, an elite group of warriors whose exploits are cataloged in 2 Samuel chapter 23. There was Joab, David's nephew and commanding general, a ruthless and effective military leader. There were foreign mercenaries, including 600 Philistine soldiers from Gath who had followed David since his outlaw days. The army campaigned seasonally, in spring, when roads dried and grass grew for horses and pack animals. Armies marched. Siege warfare could extend into summer and early fall. Winter brought soldiers home. The evening the king stayed behind it. Is in this context that 2 Samuel chapter 11 opens with a sentence of devastating implication. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. The detail is not incidental, the narrator wants us to know. David is where he should not be. Kings lead their armies. This is both military necessity and political theater. The king's presence legitimizes the campaign, inspires the troops, and demonstrates his courage. David had built his reputation on personal valor. He had fought Goliath, led raids as an outlaw, charged into battle alongside his men. But now, in the spring of approximately 990 BCE, while Joab besieges Rabbah, the Ammonite capital, modern Amman, Jordan, David is in Jerusalem. Why? The text doesn't say. Some scholars suggest fatigue after years of campaigning. Others propose that David, now in his 40s, was delegating military command to trusted generals, a common practice as kings age. Some see political calculation. Remaining in the capital to manage a growing bureaucracy, the narrator offers no excuse. The silence is pointed one evening. David rises from his bed. The Hebrew suggests late afternoon or early evening rest, a common practice in the heat. He walks on the roof of the palace. Ancient Israelite houses, including royal structures, had flat roofs used for storage, sleeping in hot weather and leisure. From the palace roof, elevated on the ridge, David could see across the city, and he sees a woman bathing. The text says she was very beautiful. The Hebrew phrase is emphatic. Her name is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite. She is bathing. The text does not specify where. Some interpreters imagine a private courtyard. Others suggest a rooftop cistern or bathing area. The ancient city was densely packed, houses built close together, privacy limited. Bathing would typically occur in enclosed spaces, but the king's elevated vantage point could penetrate those enclosures. There is no indication Bathsheba knows she is being watched. David sends someone to find out about her. The report comes back. She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. The identification is crucial. Eliam is listed in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 34, as one of David's elite 30 warriors. Uriah is a Hittite, one of the foreign mercenaries in David's service, also among the 30. These are not obscure people. They are part of David's inner military circle. Bathsheba is the daughter of one of David's champions and the wife of another. Everyone involved would know each other. This is not an anonymous encounter. This is the king acting within a tight social network where relationships, loyalties, and obligations intersect. The summons David sends messengers to get her. The Hebrew verb is active, direct. There is no recorded negotiation. She comes to the palace. He sleeps with her. Then she returns home. The brevity of the narration is striking. In fewer than 20 words in Hebrew, the act is described. There is no dialogue, no description of Bathsheba's thoughts or feelings, no indication of consent or resistance. The narrative perspective is external, almost clinical. What can we infer? In ancient Near Eastern law codes, including those from Mesopotamia and the Hittite Empire, a married woman's adultery was a capital offense, punishable by death. A man who slept with another man's wife could also face execution, but these laws applied to ordinary citizens. What about a king? Royal power in the ancient world was nearly absolute within the king's domain. Kings could requisition property, conscript labor, and command obedience. Sexual access to subjects' wives and daughters was a recognized, if morally fraught, aspect of royal prerogative in many cultures. The prophet Samuel, warning Israel about kingship in 1 Samuel chapter 8, lists among the king's abuses: "He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants." The warning implies comprehensive appropriation. Could Bathsheba have refused the king's summons? Legally, probably not. Socially, certainly not. The power differential was absolute. Some time passes. Bathsheba sends word to David, "I am pregnant." The message is simple, factual. The problem is enormous under Israelite law. If Uriah discovers his wife is pregnant while he's been away at war for months, the conclusion is inescapable. Adultery. The penalty is death by stoning for Bathsheba, and potentially political catastrophe for David. A king who violates his own warriors' marriages undermines military loyalty and invites divine judgment, according to the covenant theology that governed Israel's understanding of kingship. David cannot allow this pregnancy to become public as his child. The cover-up begins. David's response reveals both his political cunning and his moral collapse. He sends word to Joab at the siege of Rabbah, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." The request would not have seemed unusual. Kings regularly summoned officers from the field for reports, consultations, or assignments. Uriah arrives in Jerusalem. David asks him how Joab is doing, how the soldiers are faring, and how the war is progressing. The questions are standard, even cordial. Then David tells Uriah to go down to his house and wash his feet. The instruction appears innocent. A commander returning from campaign would naturally want to rest at home. The phrase "wash your feet" is sometimes understood as a euphemism for intimacy with one's wife, though it can also mean literal washing, a gesture of hospitality and relaxation. David's intention is transparent to the reader. If Uriah sleeps with Bathsheba, the pregnancy can be attributed to him. The timeline would be plausible. The scandal would be averted. David even sends a gift after Uriah, a gesture of royal favor. But Uriah does not go home. He sleeps at the entrance to the palace with the king's servants. When David hears this, he summons Uriah again and asks why he didn't go home after such a long journey. Uriah's response is one of the most devastating speeches in the narrative. "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." The words cut. Uriah embodies the warrior code: solidarity with comrades, abstention from comfort while brothers fight, loyalty to the mission. In ancient warfare, soldiers often practiced ritual abstinence before and during battle, a practice attested in various cultures, including Israel. 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 4 through 5, mentions this custom when David's men are on a mission. Uriah's refusal is not personal suspicion of his wife, but professional honor. He will not enjoy home and hearth while the army sleeps in the field. The irony is shattering. Uriah, the foreigner, the Hittite mercenary, displays more integrity than David, the anointed king of Israel, the man after God's own heart. The contrast is the narrator's indictment. David is shown to be morally inferior to his own subordinate. David tries again. He invites Uriah to stay another day that evening. David gets him drunk. The calculation is cold. Intoxication might override Uriah's scruples, but even drunk, Uriah does not go home. He sleeps again with the palace servants. His discipline holds. David's plan has failed. The murder plot faced with Uriah's incorruptible honor, David moves to a darker solution. In the morning, he writes a letter to Joab. The content is chilling. Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. David seals the letter and hands it to Uriah himself to carry back to Joab. This detail is sometimes overlooked, but it is profound. Uriah, the loyal soldier, becomes the unwitting courier of his own death sentence. He rides back to the siege lines carrying the king's order for his execution. The image is tragically emblematic of his trust and David's betrayal. Joab, reading the letter, understands immediately. The text does not record his reaction, but Joab is a pragmatist. Loyal to David above all else and willing to do whatever the king requires, he devises a military action. During an assault on Rabbah's walls, Joab assigns Uriah to a position where Ammonite defenders are strongest. The plan is to make Uriah's death appear as a casualty of war, not murder. When the Ammonites counterattack from the wall, Uriah and several other soldiers are killed. Joab sends a messenger back to David with a report of the battle. He instructs the messenger carefully. If David becomes angry about the tactical blunder of advancing too close to the city wall, a violation of basic siege protocol, as Joab himself notes, referencing the death of Abimelech in Judges chapter 9, who was killed by a millstone dropped from a wall, the messenger should then add, Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead." The messenger delivers the report. He describes the Ammonite sortie, the Israelite casualties, the deaths near the wall. David's response is telling. He does not express anger over the tactical failure. Instead, he tells the messenger to encourage Joab. "Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it." The phrase, "the sword devours one as well as another," is a maxim. Fatalistic shrug at the randomness of combat death. But there is nothing random about Uriah's death. David knows it. Joab knows it. The narrator knows it. The reader knows it. David is speaking in code, signaling to Joab that the mission is accomplished, the problem solved. The cynicism is bottomless. Bathsheba's mourning and marriage. When Bathsheba hears that her husband is dead, she mourns for him. The text states this simply. The mourning period in ancient Israel typically lasted 7 days. Though practices varied, we are told nothing of Bathsheba's grief, her knowledge of events, or her feelings. The narrative maintains its external perspective. After the mourning period ends, David sends for her and brings her to his house. She becomes his wife and bears him a son. The sequence is swift. David has eliminated the obstacle, married the woman, and legitimized the child to outside observers. This would appear as a king marrying a war widow, a conventional practice. Kings often married the widows of fallen officers as a gesture of honor and provision. No one outside the inner circle, David, Bathsheba, Joab, perhaps a few others, would know the truth. The cover-up appears complete, then comes one of the most important sentences in the entire narrative, the hinge on which the moral weight swings. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. This sentence is not reported speech. It is the narrator's theological commentary. It breaks the external perspective to reveal the divine verdict. In Hebrew, the phrase is stark. The thing was evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Everything that follows, the confrontation, the judgment, the consequences, flows from this divine displeasure, the prophet's confrontation. 2 Samuel chapter 12 opens with God sending the prophet Nathan to David. Nathan is a court prophet, introduced earlier in 2 Samuel chapter 7, where he conveyed God's covenant promise to David that his dynasty would endure forever. Nathan has access to the king. He is trusted. He comes to David and tells him a story. There were 2 men in a certain town. Nathan says, one was rich, owning many flocks and herds. The other was poor, possessing nothing except one little ewe lamb. The poor man raised this lamb like a daughter. It grew up with his children, shared his food, drank from his cup, even slept in his arms. It was like family. A traveler came to visit the rich man, but the rich man, unwilling to take from his own flock to prepare a meal for his guest, took the poor man's lamb instead. He butchered it and served it to the traveler. David's reaction is immediate and furious. As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity. The outburst reveals David's sense of justice when he is not personally implicated. The demand for 4-fold restitution aligns with Exodus chapter 22, verse 1, which prescribes this penalty for stealing a sheep. The declaration, "he must die," reflects David's rage at the rich man's callousness. David sees clearly the injustice when it is abstracted into parable. Nathan's response is 4 words in Hebrew, devastating in their simplicity. "You are the man." The accusation is direct. There is no ambiguity, no softening. Nathan then delivers God's message piece by piece. God recounts what he has done for David, anointed him king, delivered him from Saul, gave him his master's house and wives, a reference to inheriting Saul's household, a standard practice in ancient royal succession, gave him all Israel and Judah, and would have given even more if it were not enough. Then comes the indictment. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Notice the language. God does not say David committed adultery. He says David despised the word of the Lord. He says David struck down Uriah. The primary crime in the prophetic indictment is murder. The adultery is a component. But the murder is the focus. David used the Ammonite sword as his weapon, but he is the killer. The judgment continues. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. The consequences are generational. Violence will plague David's family. The sword he wielded against Uriah will turn inward, against his own household. Then God adds a second judgment. This is what the Lord says, out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. David's confession and the child's fate. David's response to Nathan is immediate and unqualified. I have sinned against the Lord. In Hebrew, the sentence is 4 words. Chatati Yahweh. I have sinned to Yahweh. No excuses, no justification, no attempt to deflect blame or minimize the offense. This is markedly different from Saul's responses when confronted by Samuel in 1 Samuel chapters 13 and 15, where Saul made excuses, blamed others, and tried to negotiate. David's confession is direct. Nathan responds immediately, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die." This requires unpacking. Under the law, both adultery and murder carry the death penalty. David has committed both. By rights, he should be executed. But Nathan announces pardon. Why? The text suggests divine prerogative. God can forgive whom he chooses. There is also political reality. David is the king, the linchpin of the nation's stability, the recipient of God's covenant promise in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Executing him would throw Israel into chaos. But the pardon is not without cost, Nathan continues. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. The judgment is harsh by modern sensibilities. The child will die for the father's sin. Ancient Near Eastern thought operated with corporate and generational accountability in ways contemporary Western individualism finds difficult. The king's sin affects the whole nation. The father's crime impacts his offspring. In the narrative's theology, David's actions have ruptured the covenant relationship, and restoration requires consequence. The child becomes that consequence. Nathan leaves. The baby becomes ill. David's response is intense. He pleads with God for the child. He fasts and spends nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. His attendants try to get him to eat, but he refuses. For 7 days, David engages in what ancient Israel understood as intercessory penance. Fasting, lying on the ground, praying, seeking to move God to mercy. The elders of his household urge him to get up, to eat, but he will not. On the 7th day, the child dies. David's attendants are afraid to tell him. They reason among themselves. While the child was alive and we spoke to him, he wouldn't listen to us. How can we now tell him the child is dead? He might do something desperate. But David notices them whispering and realizes what has happened. He asks, "Is the child dead?" They answer, "He is dead." David's reaction surprises everyone. He gets up from the ground, washes, puts on lotions, changes his clothes, goes into the house of the Lord and worships. Then he goes home and asks for food. His servants are baffled. They ask him, "Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But now that the child is dead, you get up and eat." David's explanation reveals his theology of prayer and sovereignty. While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. The statement, "I will go to him, but he will not return to me," is often interpreted as an early biblical expression of belief in an afterlife or Sheol, the underworld abode of the dead. David acknowledges the finality of death and the futility of continued mourning. His pragmatism after the judgment falls is striking. Once the consequence is realized, David accepts it and moves forward. This will be a pattern in the unfolding tragedies ahead. The birth of Solomon, then David comforts Bathsheba. The text says explicitly, David comforted his wife Bathsheba. This is the first time the narrative describes any personal interaction between them beyond the sexual encounter. He goes to her and makes love to her. She gives birth to a son. They name him Solomon, from the Hebrew root shalom, meaning peace or wholeness. But the narrator adds a crucial detail: the Lord loved him. To underscore this divine favor, God sends word through Nathan the prophet. God gives Solomon another name, Jedediah, which means beloved of the Lord. This second name appears only here in the biblical text. Solomon is never called Jedediah elsewhere, but its inclusion signals divine approval of this child. In contrast to the judgment on the first child, Solomon, born from the same union that produced the tragedy, will become the next king. The narrative will later show Bathsheba as the queen mother, who successfully maneuvers to place Solomon on the throne instead of his older half-brothers. But that comes much later. For now, the immediate story concludes with David returning to military action. Joab has been besieging Rabbah and has captured the city's water supply. He sends word to David, "I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise I will take the city, and it will be named after me." Joab's message is deferential but pointed. He has done the hard work but invites David to claim the final victory, preserving the king's honor and prestige. It's a loyal gesture, and perhaps also a practical one. Joab understands that David needs a visible success to restore his public image. David musters the army, goes to Rabbah, captures the city, and takes the crown from the head of the Ammonite king. The crown weighs a talent of gold, approximately 75 pounds, and contains precious stones. David brings out the plunder and puts the people of Rabbah to forced labor with saws, iron picks, and axes, and made them work at brick kilns. He does this to all the Ammonite towns. Then David and his entire army return to Jerusalem. The war is won. The affair is concluded. Uriah is dead and buried. Bathsheba is the king's wife. Solomon is born and divinely favored to the public. David remains the successful warrior king, but the divine verdict has been pronounced, and the consequences are set in motion. The sword will not depart from David's house, the unraveling of the house of David. What follows in 2 Samuel chapters 13 through 20 is a cascade of horrors that validate Nathan's prophecy with brutal precision. The narrative shifts to David's children. He has multiple wives and many sons. The firstborn is Amnon, son of Ahinoam. The third son is Absalom, son of Maacah, a princess from Geshur. Absalom has a beautiful sister named Tamar. Amnon becomes infatuated with Tamar. The Hebrew word used suggests obsessive desire, not love. Amnon is tormented by this desire because Tamar is a virgin and seems impossible for him to access. His friend Jonadab, described as a very shrewd man, devises a plan. Amnon pretends to be ill and asks David to send Tamar to prepare food for him in his presence. David, unsuspecting, sends Tamar to her half-brother's house. Tamar comes and prepares bread in Amnon's sight. But when she brings it to him, he grabs her and says, "Come to bed with me, my sister." Tamar refuses, pleading with him, "No, my brother, don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you." Her argument is desperate and multifaceted. She appeals to law, to honor, to consequences, even suggesting he petition David for permission to marry her, though Leviticus chapter 18 forbids marriage between half-siblings. She may be grasping at any deterrent, but Amnon refuses to listen. He is stronger than she is. He rapes her. Then, immediately, his feelings invert. The text says, "Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her." The Hebrew emphasizes the extremity. His hatred surpasses his former desire. He tells her, "Get up and get out." Tamar protests, "No, sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me." She is right. Under Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 28 to 29, a man who rapes a virgin is required to marry her and can never divorce her, a law intended to provide for the woman whose marriage prospects are destroyed. By casting her out, Amnon compounds the crime, but he calls his servant and has her thrown out, bolting the door behind her. Tamar puts ashes on her head, tears the ornate robe that virgin daughters of the king wore, and goes away weeping aloud, her hand on her head, all gestures of mourning and devastation. Absalom finds her and realizes what happened. He tells her, "Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." The instruction to be quiet is pragmatic and tragic. In the patriarchal honor culture, speaking publicly about the rape would bring further shame on Tamar and the family. Absalom takes her into his household. The text says, "And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house." A desolate woman. The word desolate in Hebrew conveys utter ruin, isolation, and barrenness. Her life is effectively over in social terms. She is neither virgin nor wife, neither married nor honored. She vanishes from the narrative after this, but her desolation hangs over everything that follows. David hears about all this and is furious, but he does nothing. The Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation, includes a phrase not in the Hebrew Masoretic text, explaining that David did not punish Amnon because he loved him, since he was his firstborn. Whether this reflects an original reading or an explanatory gloss, it captures the narrative's implication. David's favoritism or paralysis prevents justice. Perhaps his own guilt over Bathsheba and Uriah haunts him. Perhaps he cannot bring himself to condemn his son for a sexual crime when he himself is guilty. The text does not say, but his inaction is conspicuous and catastrophic. Absalom says nothing to Amnon, neither good nor bad, but he hates him. For 2 full years, Absalom waits. Then he devises a plan. He invites all the king's sons to a sheep-shearing festival at Baal-Hazor near Ephraim. He asks David to come, but David declines. Absalom then asks if Amnon can come. David is suspicious. Why should he go with you? But Absalom presses him, and David sends Amnon and all the other princes, the sword unleashed at the feast. Absalom instructs his men, "When Amnon is in high spirits from wine, strike him down. Don't be afraid, I myself am giving you the order. Be strong and brave." The servants obey. They kill Amnon, the other sons of the king. Panic, mount their mules and flee while they are on their way. A report reaches David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, not one of them is left. David tears his clothes and lies on the ground. All his attendants stand by with their clothes torn. But Jonadab, the same shrewd man who helped Amnon devise the rape, tells David, "My lord should not think that they killed all the princes. Only Amnon is dead." This has been Absalom's express intention ever since the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. The clarification is cold comfort. One son is dead by another son's hand. The sword has entered David's house. Absalom flees to Geshur, to his maternal grandfather's kingdom, and stays there 3 years. David mourns for his son every day. The text is ambiguous whether his son refers to the dead Amnon or the exiled Absalom, or both. Eventually, Joab orchestrates Absalom's return through an elaborate ruse involving a wise woman from Tekoa. David allows Absalom back to Jerusalem but refuses to see him for 2 more years. When they finally meet, David kisses Absalom, but the relationship is fractured. Absalom begins to conspire. Over the next 4 years, Absalom systematically undermines David's authority. He stations himself at the city gate, intercepts people bringing disputes to the king, and tells them, "Your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." Then he adds, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me and I would see that they receive justice." When anyone approaches to bow down to him, Absalom reaches out, takes hold of them, and kisses them. He does this to all Israelites who come to the king for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. When Absalom judges the time right, he goes to Hebron, the city where David was first anointed king, and declares himself king. Supporters rally. The conspiracy gains strength. A messenger comes to David. The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom. David's response is immediate flight. He tells his officials, "We must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom." We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." David leaves Jerusalem with his household, his officials, and his loyal soldiers. He leaves 10 concubines behind to take care of the palace. As he crosses the Kidron Valley and climbs the Mount of Olives, weeping, head covered, walking barefoot, signs of mourning and humiliation, the people with him also weep. It is a devastating reversal. The king who conquered Jerusalem now flees from his own son. When Absalom enters Jerusalem, one of his advisors, Ahithophel, who had defected from David, gives him counsel that fulfills Nathan's prophecy with shocking literalness. "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute." Absalom follows this advice. A tent is pitched on the palace roof, the very roof where David once walked and saw Bathsheba, and Absalom sleeps with his father's concubines in sight of all Israel. What David did in secret, his son does in public. Nathan's words come true. "You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." The civil war that follows is brutal. David's forces, though outnumbered, are better trained and led. They divide into 3 groups under Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, the Gittite. David wants to go with them, but his commanders insist he stay behind. He is worth 10,000 of them. As the army goes out, David gives orders heard by everyone. "Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." The battle takes place in the forest of Ephraim. 20,000 men die. The forest claims more victims than the sword. Soldiers become disoriented, fall into ravines, are trapped in undergrowth. Absalom, riding his mule, passes under a large oak tree. His head gets caught in the thick branches. The mule keeps going, leaving Absalom hanging in mid-air. A soldier sees him and reports to Joab. Joab is incredulous. "You saw him. Why didn't you strike him to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a warrior's belt." The soldier refuses. "Even if 1,000 shekels were weighed out into my hands, I would not lay a hand on the king's son. In our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, protect the young man Absalom for my sake." But Joab has no patience for David's sentimentality. He takes 3 javelins and plunges them into Absalom's heart, while he is still alive in the oak tree. Then 10 of Joab's armor-bearers surround Absalom, strike him and kill him. Joab sounds the trumpet, calling off the pursuit. They take Absalom's body, throw it into a big pit in the forest, and pile a large heap of rocks over it. The image is desolate. The king's son, the man who sought the throne, dumped in an unmarked grave covered with stones earlier. The text notes that Absalom had erected a pillar in the king's valley as a monument to himself, because he had no son to carry on his name. Now he lies under a pile of rocks in an anonymous forest pit. David's grief and the returned messengers run to David with news of the victory. When David asks, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" the messenger tries to soften the news, but David understands. His grief explodes. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." David goes up to the room over the gate and weeps as he goes. He cries out, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." The repetition conveys the depth of his anguish. The troops returning victorious hear that the king is weeping and mourning for his son. The victory turns to mourning for the whole army. The men steal into the city as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. Joab confronts David bluntly. "Today, you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come on you from your youth till now." The rebuke is harsh but effective. David goes to the gate and sits there. The men rally. David returns to Jerusalem, but his authority is diminished. Another rebellion breaks out under Sheba. a Benjamite. Though it is quickly suppressed, David's final years are marked by famine, plague, and further violence. The sword never departs from his house. Just as Nathan prophesied, Bathsheba's final role as David grows old, too feeble to keep warm even under blankets. His court finds a young virgin, Abishag the Shunammite, to care for him and lie beside him for warmth. David does not have sexual relations with her. The detail emphasizes his physical decline. Into this weakness steps Adonijah, another of David's sons who declares himself king. He sacrifices sheep, cattle, and fattened calves at the stone of Zoheleth near En-Rogel, inviting all his brothers except Solomon and all the royal officials of Judah, but not Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the warrior, or the special guard loyal to David. Nathan goes to Bathsheba and says, "Have you not heard that Adonijah has become king, and our Lord David knows nothing about it? Now then, let me advise you how you can save your own life and the life of your son Solomon." Nathan instructs her to go to David and remind him of his oath that Solomon would be king. Then ask why Adonijah has become king. Nathan promises to come in while she is speaking and confirm her words. Bathsheba goes to David's chamber. She bows down before him. David asks, "What is it you want?" Bathsheba replies, "My lord, you yourself swore to me your servant by the Lord your God. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. But now Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord the king, do not know about it." She details Adonijah's actions and concludes, "My lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are on you, to learn from you who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise, as soon as my lord the king is laid to rest with his ancestors, I and my son Solomon will be treated as criminals." While she is still speaking, Nathan arrives and confirms everything. David responds decisively. He swears, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, I will surely carry out this very day what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place." Bathsheba bows with her face to the ground and says, "May my lord King David live forever." David orders that Solomon be anointed king immediately. Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah carry out the coronation. Solomon rides on David's own mule to Gihon, where Zadok anoints him with oil from the sacred tent. They blow the trumpet and shout, "Long live King Solomon!" The people follow him, playing pipes and rejoicing with such joy that the ground shakes. This is the last significant appearance of Bathsheba in the narrative involving David. She has gone from the woman bathing on a rooftop, summoned to the palace, widowed, married to the king, bereaved of her first child, and mother of the king's successor. She has moved from complete passivity in the early narrative to decisive political action at the end. Whether this represents her agency emerging or simply the narrator's different focus, the text does not say, but her intervention secures the throne for Solomon and fulfills the earlier note that the Lord loved him, separating myth from record now. After following this narrative through its entire arc, we must address what can and cannot be known historically, and what interpretations have been imposed on the text versus what the text actually says. Myth 1, Bathsheba seduced David. This interpretation, common in medieval and some modern commentaries, has no textual support. The text never describes Bathsheba as intending to be seen, dressing provocatively or initiating contact. The text says David saw her bathing, sent someone to inquire about her, sent messengers to get her, and slept with her. The verbs are active on David's side, passive on hers. Ancient readers sometimes blamed Bathsheba to exonerate David, but the narrative itself places full responsibility on the king. Myth 2. The encounter was consensual adultery. While the text does not describe explicit force, the power differential makes consent functionally impossible. A king's summons is a command. The law codes of the ancient Near East recognized gradations of culpability based on power and coercion. The prophet Nathan's indictment focuses on David's abuse of power, not on Bathsheba's complicity. She is never condemned in the text. Myth 3. Uriah suspected Bathsheba's adultery. There is no evidence for this. Uriah's refusal to go home is explained by military honor code, not suspicion. His speech about solidarity with troops in the field is straightforward. The narrative contains no hint that he doubted his wife. Myth 4. Bathsheba orchestrated Uriah's death. Nothing in the text suggests Bathsheba knew of or participated in the murder plot. David writes the letter to Joab. David hands it to Uriah. Joab executes the plan. Bathsheba is informed of her husband's death and mourns. The text gives no indication of her involvement. Myth 5. Bathsheba manipulated her way to power. While Bathsheba does act decisively in 1 Kings chapter 1 to secure Solomon's succession, this occurs decades after the initial events and in response to a genuine threat. Nathan the prophet initiates the intervention. The narrative presents Bathsheba as advocating for her son's survival, not scheming for power. Myth 6. God punished Bathsheba by killing her child. The text says, God struck the child David fathered with Bathsheba. But the language of the judgment is directed at David, because by doing this, you have shown utter contempt for the Lord. The son born to you will die. The consequence falls on David's household. Bathsheba's perspective is not given. What we can say with confidence based on the primary source is this. King David, at the height of his power around 990 BCE, saw Bathsheba bathing, summoned her, slept with her, and she became pregnant. When David learned of the pregnancy, he tried to cover it up by bringing her husband Uriah home from war. When Uriah's honor prevented the cover-up, David arranged his murder. David then married Bathsheba. The prophet Nathan confronted David with his crime. David confessed. God forgave David's life but pronounced judgment. Violence would plague his house. The first child died. A second son, Solomon, was born and loved by God. The subsequent chapters of 2 Samuel catalog the fulfillment of Nathan's prophecy through rape, murder, rebellion, and civil war within David's family. Bathsheba later intervened to ensure Solomon's succession to the throne. What we cannot know, Bathsheba's thoughts, feelings, or degree of agency throughout these events, whether she knew of the murder plot, how much time passed between events, the exact nature of her relationship with David after their marriage, her role, if any, in Solomon's political formation. The text is remarkably restrained. It does not psychologize. It does not offer Bathsheba's interior perspective. It maintains an external, almost documentary narrative stance, focused on actions and consequences. This restraint has allowed centuries of interpretive projection, but it also preserves a kind of historical sobriety. The enduring questions the story of David and Bathsheba endures because it refuses easy answers. It presents power without accountability, desire without restraint, and consequences that multiply across generations. It shows a man described as a man after God's own heart, committing adultery and murder, then receiving both divine forgiveness and inescapable judgment. It explores the gap between public success and private corruption, between political brilliance and moral failure. David's greatness as a military leader, administrator, and poet is not erased by his crime, but neither is his crime excused by his greatness. The text holds both in tension. This is perhaps why ancient Israelite editors preserved this deeply unflattering account of their greatest king. It testifies to a commitment to truth over propaganda, to moral accountability even for the powerful, and to the theological conviction that God sees what humans hide. Bathsheba remains an enigma, visible primarily through what happens to her rather than what she does or thinks. This is itself revealing of the ancient world she inhabited, where women's voices were rarely recorded, where power was overwhelmingly male, and where survival often meant strategic silence. Yet the text also shows her emergence, from object of the king's desire to mother of the next king, from passive recipient of David's actions to active agent in securing her son's throne. The question, what really happened between David and Bathsheba, can be answered factually from the biblical text. A king abused his power, committed adultery and murder, was confronted and judged, and suffered consequences that tore his family apart. But the deeper questions about power, gender, accountability, forgiveness, and the complexity of human character remain as urgent today as they were 3,000 years ago when this story was first written down. The sword that entered David's house through his own actions did not depart. Amnon raped Tamar. Absalom killed Amnon. Absalom rebelled and died. Adonijah attempted to seize the throne. Violence begat violence, just as Nathan said. And yet from this broken line, Solomon emerged. From the union that began with abuse and murder came the king who would build the temple. The king known for wisdom. The king through whose line, according to later tradition, the Messiah would come. The Bible does not resolve this paradox. It simply presents it. Write in the comments. How do you think power dynamics in ancient societies compare to power imbalances we see today? What does this story reveal about accountability for those in positions of authority? The conversation continues, 3 millennia later, because the questions are still ours to answer.